welcome to this module on effective team building planning. In this module we're going to go over four basic things. First of all, we're going to start by discussing planning versus plans. Second, we're going to talk about using the FIRO in order to adapt to that, to use it to be able to construct your team building plans in itself. Third of all, we're going to talk about finding games, how to find as many games as possible and to find the ones that you want. And fourth, we're going to talk about planning problem-solving games, because this becomes a bit different and a bit more advanced than the rest of it. So first of all, plans versus planning. Now, when you create your team building plan, you have two main options. Basically, you could write a step-by-step plan. So for example, I could say, okay, I want to start with introductions. So I want to start with intros, followed by name and ball, and then I can go this game, and I say, okay, for my intro, I want to start this at 9 o'clock, I should be done by 9:10, so 9:10, I'm going to be doing name plus ball at exactly 9:25, I want to be doing etc., and you can plan your whole day out precisely like this. This is called making a plan of the day. Now, planning is a bit different. Planning is this idea that you're going to kind of structure what's going to happen during the day, but it's not going to be precise. So for example, I could say, I'm going to start my name games. And here are 3 or 4 name games I like. There's this one. And I think this should take roughly, let's say, about 30 to 45 minutes. This is planning. I can then plan afterwards to say, okay, I want to move on to another kind of thing. And here are a few different options I could pick from. So for this type of game, I've got 4 different options, and let's say I want to pick 2 of them. And I think this is going to take roughly this kind of time, and I can start to use planning to sort my team building out. Now in EYP, what we often find is when you start as a chairperson for your first session, you'll build a plan, because we think that the more structured and the more you know about what you're about to do, the more confident you're going to feel and the better things will go. However, it doesn't necessarily work out that way. So for example, let's say suddenly we start 10 minutes late. Most of your plans are kind of messed up and you start to panic already. But let's say playing name plus ball, the delegates don't get the game at the beginning, and it takes you 5 or 10 more minutes to explain than you thought you would. Then someone goes too slow again. Let's say there's a problem, an easy problem solver or communication game that you planned 35 minutes and they do it in 10 minutes. Suddenly, your plans no longer kind of go accordingly, and so everything that you put down to boost your confidence may actually retract your confidence, so it may actually make it worse for you. So in EYP, we tend to try to avoid these type of plans, and instead we go for planning. What is really important for your team building is to know what you're going to be doing that day. Not to go in and say, okay, I know team building, let's just go with the flow and I'm going to give the delegates what I think they want at the moment. That doesn't necessarily work. You may be caught at the last minute and think, oh, damn, what do I do for my delegates? And you can't necessarily think on the spot, and then you give them the inappropriate game at the wrong time. So what we tend to do is planning. And with planning, one of the basic ways is this, like I said, you pick your type of game, and then you try to list a few different ones that you think are good within that area. And you may tend to list more games than you would actually play, but this way, when you go to play them, you already have a set of games that you have the material for, that you're ready to play, and you can do whenever you like. So this is planning versus plans. You've already had a module on FIRO, on group dynamics, and we've learned the different steps and how this relates to different team building games. Now, it would be kind of silly of us just to say, okay, we've done that, let's get rid of this and just randomly plan our team building and be like, okay, I really love Abigail's Tale, let's start with that. No, we have to plan our team building based on the FIRO cycle, and it can really, really help us. So for example, with FIRO, we know that we start with I, we go to U, we may go into some kind of honeymoon phase depending on which type of FIRO cycle you've received, but then the basic FIRO cycle will say we enter certain conflicts, we become we, and we go to end. So your team building process should cover mainly from I to coming up to we, this kind of side. So we can look at it straight away and say, we know what kind of games we need. We need name games. So we start on our planning, like we discussed before, we start with name games and we say, okay, what kind of name games do we need? And then we start to list these. When we go to U, we know we need icebreakers. We need, for example, getting to know each other games. We may need touchy-feely games to decrease social barriers. So we start to list these different kinds of games there, not necessarily in a certain order, but we can just list them, like we said, in the planning side of this module. And then going into conflicts. If you like to use this kind of in-between honeymoon phase, then you know you need to start with simpler problem solvers, maybe quite easy communication games, etc., making sure that they can succeed so they can build this false unity before entering an actual conflict. So you can try to create a category and start listing games within that. Then moving on to the conflict, you want to start to list really difficult problem solvers, things that they think they're going to achieve but they don't. So that way you can make sure that they're going to learn lessons from it. Like we said before, the aim here isn't to succeed, but to show where the weaknesses in their team so they can learn. And then moving on. So each time we can actually use this Firo cycle to adapt and to actually plan our team building process in itself. Now you may be asking, okay, what about trust games? What about energizers? Where do they fit in? Well, within the Firo cycle, energizers, the idea of energizers is if you don't have enough energy, use an energizer to increase your energy levels. But however, certain energizers are extremely touchy-feely, others aren't. So depending on how well your delegates are together, depends on what kind of energizer you can use at that moment. And for trust games, there is no specific place where you should be playing trust games, but you can play it when you feel that your delegates are already starting to trust each other and you would like them to trust each other even more, etc. And this is when you can start to integrate your trust games, so you can create a separate category within your planning about your trust games. So now you know the difference between making a plan and planning, and you know how the Firo cycle can help you create this planning. Now you have this, we're going to quickly discuss where to find team building games. Well, you can find your games first of all from your memories. Let's say if this is your first time chairing, then as a delegate, you'd have experienced different team building games from your chairperson. But what's always good to do is to understand why they played it with you. So not necessarily doing the game just because you enjoyed it, but doing the game because you understand why it's important within the Firo cycle. But maybe, let's say you remember certain games, you've forgotten the rules, you want to try to find them, or you want to find new games, or this kind of stuff. Well, the first place you can go to are other EYPers. You can ask someone, what's your favourite problem solver? Do you know any cool trust games I could try out? I'm lost for getting to know each other energizers. I always do 2 truths and a lie. Can you suggest something new? Ask other people and they will start to suggest lots of things that they found very useful. Ask more experienced people and they can give you really, really cool ideas. So you can always start with friends in UIP. There are lots of really good guides out there. For the past decade or two, so many sessions have been writing out team building guides because they kind of realise that lots of people only know a slight number of games, and if we can expand their knowledge to so many more games, they become much better chairpersons. So there's some really, really good guides out there, and even the EYP Academy, now known as the Training and Alumni Development Council, made a new list of energizers where they kind of compiled all different games together. I think that was back in 2011 or 2012, around that kind of time. And they have a really good guide out there with all different team building games and good explanation for this. However, in the past couple of years, there's been a really great innovation on the alumni.eyp.org. If you go on there, and on the very left-hand side, you click left slightly down, EYP info, and then on guides and materials, you go on that, and you should see this thing called team building database. On team building database, you can pick a type of game, the length of the game, how many delegates you have, etc. You can choose a certain criteria and click search, and it will give you a whole list of different games. And it's something that's constantly updated, so when some people come out with new games or there's a new trend going on with certain games, it goes straight onto this database. So it's all up to date, and you don't have to read through like 10 or 20 different guides to find all different games. So this is also a really good way of finding games. So this is the last part of this module, and in this part we're going to discuss how to actually work with problem solvers. And I'm not talking about how to do a problem solver, I'm talking about how to plan a problem solver in your planning. So we're going to take Abigail, for example. And so this is a little module that I like to call Why on Earth Should We Play Abigail? Now, I bet you as a delegate probably played Abigail. Maybe as a chairperson you've already done it, but everybody at least knows Abigail in UIP. It's probably the most used and abused game. However, what you don't realise is in a chairs team, if you ask each chairperson to explain Abigail, they would probably play it in a different way. Now this has a huge impact. For example, Abigail, we could play it by, we could tell everyone the story and then get them straight away to form a consensus. We could, instead of that, we could then give them 5 minutes to decide individually before forming a consensus. So here we have individual leading to a consensus. We could do it another way. We could, for example, say we can start at the individual level and then move to, let's say, in pairs, and then you can move to larger groups, and then you can finally move to a consensus. These are completely different ways of playing Abigail. Other things you could do is time limits. So with your time limit, you could set like a really long time limit, for example, giving them an hour, 45 minutes, etc. You can set a really short time limit. You may set no time limit. You may be strict to your time limit, or you may let them go a bit more, give them another 5 minutes, 10 minutes if they need it, etc. So you can write here strict. When you play Abigail, you could, let's say, change Abigail depending on your topic. For example, Farida's Tale. Farida's Tale is great for topics, anything to do with multiculturalism, religious exceptionalism, etc. It's really good for that one. So you could, for example, blindfold some people. By blindfolding 2 or 3 people in the committee, you could also choose to read Abigail's Tale to them. So you can read it to them, or you can get them to read it. For example, you can get them to read it, and then after they've read it to themselves, you take the paper away, and you're not allowed to answer any questions. Or maybe you leave them with Abigail's Tale, with the paper, for the entire period of time. You could do it these different ways. You could draw Abigail's Tale. See, many chairs do that, where they actually draw the whole story out as they're telling the story to get the delegates to visualize it. But in other words, here, you have so many different ways of playing Abigail's Tale. Now, why do we even care about this? Well, we really do care about this for when we start to plan problem solves. Because let's say, if you ask the question why we're doing a problem solver, the answer should be because I need something from my delegates. I'm not doing a problem solver because I like this problem solver, but I think my delegates have a certain problem, and I'm going to try to test this problem and push it and get them to solve these weaknesses within their committee. So, for example, if I think that my delegates have an issue with time management, I can be strict on time and set them a short period of time. However, if time management isn't the thing I want to focus on, but instead I want to focus on discussions, on clashing values, on conflict, etc., then I can either give them no time or give them really long time and not be strict on time whatsoever, because I want them to discuss a lot more, because this is what I want out of them. Consensus. If I get them straight away to go from a team, from individuals, where they don't think about it by themselves, I read them the story, and they have to agree straight away, and let's say they have a kind of short time limit, then what I'm doing is telling them that consensus is quite easy. And they're going to straight away try to find a consensus, try to agree, and you're not going to have much of a conflict. However, if I tell them individually to make their minds up, write down their beliefs, and then reach a consensus, this is going to be a lot more difficult. So if I'm doing this, I'm going to really be pushing a conflict. If I really want a conflict within the committee, a clash of values, then individual, then moving to consensus is a great way forward. I can go individual, then in pairs, then in groups, and then a consensus. What does this do? Well, this increases participation, because if everyone's in pairs, then let's say if I have 16 delegates, I have 8 conversations simultaneously, rather than just one conversation. When they go into groups, I then maybe have 4 conversations simultaneously. In other words, I'm allowing everyone to participate and to engage with ideas, so getting them ready for doing this. And then what we're also doing is, because they start as individuals and then as pairs they have to agree, in small groups they have to agree, in a committee they have to agree, is we're developing consensus building. they're getting used to forming consensus in difficult situations, or they're getting used to understanding how difficult consensus building is. If I change it depending on my topic, some benefits I can get from this would be, for example, getting them first of all to see these different values of conflicts within a given topic. Like I said with Farida's Tale, if my committee was on multiculturalism and religious exceptionalism, and I used Farida's Tale, then I can get my delegates straight away to kind of see their different values and their different approaches regarding the topic. It can also help them maybe form already a consensus on which way they want to take the topic, or it could alert myself and tell me, oh no, there is a big problem within here, and so as soon as we go into committee work, we need to deal with these different values within the topic straight away. Also, you can change it depending on the topic and make the story a bit more intense for them. So for example, changing from Abigail's Tale to Farida's Tale. Farida's Tale is much more likely to create a conflict than Abigail's Tale is, because people can connect with these values a lot stronger. Blindfolding. If, for example, I had 3 or 4 delegates who I saw were quite dominant, quite taking lots of space, and from the beginning I thought to myself, I would like the other delegates to have a chance of taking some space before some kind of structure, forms and role definitions are too formed within the committee, then I could decide to blindfold these people. Or I could blindfold the whole committee, and that way it's all about communication, because they can't see each other, they really have to listen to each other. So this could enhance their communication and their listening skills especially. If I read it to them, I can, for example, get them to close their eyes and really imagine what I'm reading to them and really put some passion in the story to create a bigger conflict, or I can get them to read it, and if I get them to read it and take the story away from them, then I'm also getting them to realise that they have to listen to rules, they have to use their memory and all agree upon things for a short period of time. So for example, if one person thinks the story was one way and the other one thinks it was another way, this is a memory issue or a misunderstanding of rules, which would muck everything up for them later on. Drawing. Let's say I have some issues with language within the committee. Not everyone has the same language skills. If I start to draw Farida, maybe it would help certain people visualise it. And make it a bit more easier for them to connect to it. The more they connect to it, the higher the conflict, etc. So as you can see here, every single different way I play Abigail's Tale is going to give me a different result. It's going to give me a different level of conflict. It's going to focus on different things, whether it's time management, consensus building, increased participation. It's going to focus on completely different things. So if I turn around to you now and you're about to do a problem solver, and I said, what would you like to do for your delegates? And you said, I think Abigail's Tale is cool. That tells me nothing. I don't know how you're going to be playing Abigail's Tale, because what you have to first of all do is analyse what problems do your delegates have, or what would you like to test them in. You don't know about their time management skills, but you want to test it out. You don't know about their consensus building skills, but you want to test it out, for example. And when you start to realise what you want to test out, what you want to know from your delegates, then you can start to understand, first of all, what problem solving would you like to do? And then, how would you like to do that problem solver? So a technique that I usually like to do is per session, I will pick maybe 3 problem solvers that I really want to do. And I will do this analysis with it. I will have a first slide of analysis here, then afterwards all the other things I was talking about on how, for example, this would affect the committee, I would draw out all the different areas. And then I would look at the whole spread of each game. So for example, I'm just about to go into problem solvers and I can see certain issues within my committee. I then look at my notebook and I see this and I realise, hold on a second, yeah, Minefield is perfect right now if I play it in this way, if I give them 10 minutes for strategy and let them decide how many minutes they want for their execution. And if I make sure there are only 2 people in the minefield at all times and I have 0 communication with them throughout the game, apart from explaining the rules and debrief. For example, if this way I wanted to play, I realised, yes, this is perfect for my committee right now. So I would really encourage you to kind of do this when it comes to your problem solvers, so you can actually take your team building to the next level and not just do a problem solver because you enjoyed it from your chair. So this is the module on how to effectively plan team building